Welcome back to FaceItNet. Today, in this video, I'm going to show you how to install vCenter server appliance on a virtual machine. So, if you look at it here, I got a ESXi 7 machine, that is my host machine, and I got my second host machine, and I got a Windows 10 client. For me to install the vCenter server, you need to have an operating system, or you need to have a computer where you can run this run this executable file, right? So the vCenter appliance comes as an executable file. So you can see here, I got the vCenter server here. It's about I'm pretty sure it's about 9 GB file. So you can see it's a 9 GB file. And if you double click, and if you go to VCSA vCenter server appliance UI installer, you see the installer is a package for 3 different types of operating system. You got a Linux based, Mac based, and a Windows based. And under Windows based, you see the installer.exe. So you just go to installer.exe and right click and run as administrator. So when you click run as administrator, it comes to the screen where you can start the installation. The the vCenter server has 2 phases of installation. In the first phase, you're just going to install the vCenter server, right? By just clicking here, it's like an installation. So in the stage 1 or phase 1, it's just going to deploy the vCenter server, and then in steps 2, you are going to set up the vCenter server. So what is the meaning of deploying vCenter server? Means this vCenter server is an OVA file. Technically, it's an OVA file. If you look at this one, right, this is an OVA file that we can take that OVA file and we can then send it to the ESXi server. So by just clicking install or deploy the vCenter server, you're just creating an OVA file and you're going to push it to a host machine. So on the way, when you go through the configuration, see end user license agreement, vCenter server deployment target. At this point, you are going to provide the target, which is your destination host machine's IP address. So in my case, my destination host is this. So if I provide the IP address of 192.168.200.135, what happens? It will just transfer that OVA file from this Windows 10 machine through. It will get that OVA file from here, within this operating system or within this package, and then push them to the host machine. So let's do that. I'm going to start now and click continue. So click next, accept the end user license, next. Now it's asking you to provide the destination. So in my case, the destination is 192.168.200.135, and the username and password of your host machine. Just provide the username and password of your host machine. So I'm sure that 135. Come back here and see it's 135. So I'm just going to install next. The one thing that you need to notice when you install the vCenter server, it's required a lot of resources, right? Pretty much the tiny version of vCenter required about 12 gig RAM and around 390 GB space. So hopefully we will have enough space here in this ESXi host machine, and then I can transfer it there. So let's accept the built-in certificate as a created certificate, and then provide the virtual machine. As I said to you, the vCenter server is going to create an OVA and then transfer into your destination host. So once it's transferred to the destination host, you're going to run a virtual machine. All right, the vCenter server appliance is going to run as a virtual machine inside the ESXi server. So provide a name for that virtual machine. I'm going to say VCSA, vCenter server. Right, you can set up the password, root password. This is for your console access of the vCenter server virtual machine. Right, to access vCenter server through the web interface, we got another login information that I'll show you later on. So this is where the deployment comes in. As I explained to you, I'm going to use the tiny version of the deployment. Your tiny version required 12 gig RAM, and you can see it's required about 578 for 579 GB storage. I'm sure that I don't have that much storage here. I'm sure that this computer or this virtual machine has got only 300 gig on the Datastore 2. So I've created this 2 as my Datastore 2. I'm going to try and push into that storage and see how it works. So let's click next. All right, I'm going to pick that Datastore 2 and I'll make sure that enable the thin provisioning so that it's not going to really use the entire space. Click next. Here it's going to ask you the details for that specific virtual machine. So I'm going to put this on VM network. You can change these networks later on, so don't worry about this part, right? And then IP address for that vCenter server appliance virtual machine. I didn't want to create a complex network here, but in real world we can put this into a management network. You can put all the virtual machines into one network, and you can do even vMotion on a different network. But I have prepared my network to support this configuration. If you look into here, I put this virtual machine into net mode, but I have got some custom network that I designed it here with the support of management VM network and vMotion. I'm not going to go through this part now because it's too much complicated right now, and I'll have to explain why I have to do this one and how to set up these different types of networks. So I'll skip those parts, but maybe in another video I'll show you how to create these different types of network and manage it, right? So that's, we will do it on a different video, right? So for the time being I'll put into the VM network. So the IP address, they are all in NAT mode. So my this virtual machine is also going to be in NAT mode, so I'll put the NAT mode IP address. Let's say I'm going to put 200, and the subnet mask, it's a default class C subnet mask, and the gateway in NAT mode, as we all know, .2. DNS server, you can provide same thing, right? And click next, right? So pretty much reconfirming the deployment information and click finish. Right, now this is going to deploy the vCenter server. This will take a couple of minutes time, so we'll wait. Technically the whole installation will take about, depends on your computer's performance, it may take from 1 to 2 hours. If your computer is really good, it can run in 30 minutes, 35 minutes, but you need so much time to complete the installation. So this is stage 1 installation. Once this stage 1 is completed, we will go to the setup of vCenter server, right? So let's wait here until we complete the stage 1, and then we'll move to stage 2. All right, now you can see the stage 1 deployment is done, it's completed, and now we are in the prompt to continue to the stage 2. So you can see if you just click continue, that's going to start the stage 2 to process or to proceed with stage 2 of the deployment process. vCenter server setup, click continue. So I'm going to just click continue, right? So let's continue, and while it's loading up, let me quickly go back to vCenter server and show you what's there. Look at it here. This is 135 IP address. So I've gone to 135 IP address, and I can see there's a virtual machine sitting here. Right, this virtual machine, I didn't create this virtual machine. Keep in mind, I didn't do anything to create this virtual machine. This virtual machine was just created by pushing through the step 1 of the configuration. See, it's just completed. See, right, now I'm going to continue from stage 2. Let me go back to stage 2 process. Stage 1 is completed, and now we are moving to stage 2, setting up the vCenter server. So the vCenter server can be set up in 2 different ways, right? I'll show you the configuration steps in a second. So we can put the PSU, the platform service controller, within the vCenter server, or we can have it in a separate system as well. So before we go there, let's see whether we can synchronize the time. So I'm going to synchronize the time and enable SSH, and I'll go to the next. The next stage is SSO, right? Single sign-on. So this is where you need to be very careful. This is your web interface login prompt. This is where you are going to use your web browser to log in to vCenter server and manage the vCenter server. If in case if you don't have a new SSO domain, you can create it. By default, the name comes on single sign-in server or single sign-on domain name is vSphere.local. So here the username is administrator. So if you are going to log into your vCenter server, your username is administrator at vSphere.local. If you got a domain controller, if you have a domain network, then you can provide the domain name. So for example, if you got facetnet.com.au, so your username will be administrator at facetnet.com.au. So you have to provide that here. So I'm just going to continue with the default. I'll leave it as vSphere.local and I'm going to provide the password. All right. So let's provide the password. Right. vSphere.local. So provide vSphere.local administrator and next. So that customer experience program, do you want to enroll to or join with? I can just remove it. Next. These are the information where to get access to your vSphere server, right? And finish. All right, this process cannot be reverted, so you can't stop and do anything. So once it started, that's it, right? There's no way we can stop in between. So be sure that you're going to start the installation and click yes, and it's going to take time to do it. So I'll click OK and we will leave it to deploy the vCenter server. It's going to take some time, so until that we will wait. Right, so it has started and I'm going to wait here for another 30 minutes maybe. Let's look at the time. It's 10:26. We'll come back and see how long it takes to deploy this stage. Right, be there. I'll come back once it's completed. All right, now if you look at it, it's completed. It didn't take too long. It took only 11 minutes for me to complete it. So all in all, it took me around 30 minutes, 35 minutes to complete the vCenter server installation. So now the installation is done. I'm going to go through the web interface to manage it. So click on the URL and let's close it. So it takes me to the URL, right? So as you know that the IP address I have given for my virtual machine was 192.168.200.200, right? So that was the IP address I've given to this virtual machine. So you can see 200.200. So let's open up a new tab and I'm going to type in the IP 200 and hit enter. So that's certificate warning. Click continue. You can see this is vSphere interface or VMware ESXi management interface. This is your vCenter management interface. So launch vSphere client. So this is to manage the vCenter. Click on launch and you see a completely different interface than vSphere client, right? See, this is completely different interface to what you had here. So if I look out this interface, sign out. See, this is VMware ESXi interface. This is vCenter server interface. So as I said, login, it's not root. The root and the password is for the console access. Now I'm going through the web access. For me to go through the web access, I have to use the SSO. So administrator, ADMINIS, at v.local and the password. Oops, VSPHERELOCAL. Right. So now I'm logging into vCenter server appliance web interface, right? Say the password that I have given was root and another password. Let's see how to use that password. So if I want to use that password, I'll have to go to, you can see this is vCenter server and licenses and all these things. I'll come back to that later. So let me log into my vSphere, which is my ESXi server, right? The host machine, not the VCSA. it's the host server. So if I go here and if I click on console access, open the console, right here it will ask me for a username and password, right? Let me close and open this console through a web interface, console through a new tab, right? Hit enter, right? Sorry, we can go through maybe SSH, right? Let me see. Yeah, F2 to customize or console. No. Let me close this. Must be. Come back here. Launch console, open browser console. I believe one of these. No, I can't remember one of these. But if you open through that, the password should be then root and the password. So anyway, I'm not going to go there. I'm just going to complete it here. So now we can see vCenter server is ready, but you can't see any host machines in the vCenter server. The reason I need to add the infrastructure, right, to come under the vCenter server management. So I'm going to add these two ESXi servers under my vCenter. So if you go here, right, so this is your server, right click here. You can create a data center first, right? So click a data center and give a name to your data center. So let me see, this is my Melbourne one. So Melbourne data center. So it comes as a folder. And in my Melbourne data center, you can attach as many as data centers. But what I'm going to do is under Melbourne, I'm going to add the host cluster. So I can create add host and it will ask me to provide the IP address. So this one is 192.168.200.135. So I'm going to provide that. Click next. Username. Right. Next. Yes. Next. Evaluation. Next. Lockdown mode disable. Right. So we can see the first data center has been added. Similarly, I'm going to add the second host machine. Add a host. So this is 192.168.162. So I'm going to put that IP address. 2. Next. Same root. And the root password. Next. Checking for certificates and we'll come back, confirm the certificate alert. Next. 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 Still it goes under the same Datastore and finish. So now you can see this is my first host and this is my second host, and you can see the names. As you know, under my first host, remember this is my first host web interface, right? If you look at it here, I got only one virtual machine under C. It got one virtual machine called VCSA. If I go to vCenter here, let me cross this one. This is my vCenter server here. Under my host machine, I got one virtual machine called VCSA, right? So I can now create as many as virtual machines here. So if you go here, you can create new virtual machines, right? Virtual machine, and you can create it, or if you want, you can go in here and create a virtual machine. The whole reason why we wanted to maintain a vCenter server is to manage all the host machines into one network or into one simple login. Now, this is not just only one reason, but there are many reasons why we want to create a shared data store. We wanted to create a distributed switch. We want to enable the system to do the vMotion. We want to create the high availability. So if you want to do any of these configurations, you must have a vCenter server. Without that, you cannot do it. So just to rewind and just to wind up, what I've done is I've downloaded the vCenter server appliance, right? And I mounted that into one of my virtual machine. and going into the virtual machine mounted drive, going into VCSA and run this installer package. When you run the installer package, it will go through two stages. Stage one, it will install and deploy, and in stage two, it will set up. To deploy, it will ask you the destination IP address, so you have to give a destination which is your host machine, one of your ESXi host machine, provide that IP address, and it will just transfer over there. When you create the virtual machine, or when you run the virtual machine, then in stage two, that will ask you to provide the size of the deployment. In my case, in my practical network, I cannot go a bigger deployment size, so I have chosen the smallest one, which is called tiny, which required 12 gig of memory plus 576 of storage space. Even though it says 576, you don't really need to use that much. I have created with 300 gig, but I have assigned 12 gig because if you assign less than 12 gig, it wouldn't let you to create the virtual machine. All right, so keep in mind this is the process that I've gone through, and then I've logged into my vSphere server through vCenter. So I logged into my vCenter through vSphere web interface, and I have to use the SSO logins. It is not the root and the password you give, that is for console access. This is for your web interface access. So that's the process to complete this practical. Hope you understand. I'll see you in the next video how to create the vMotion in a virtual environment. So that's mean migrating virtual machine from one host to other host without shutting it down. Stay tuned for another video. I'll come up with a new video which is vMotion configuration. Thanks for watching.